I'm sure you have heard this or a very similar sentence before. A new camera doesn't take better pictures. Basically, it's the photographer who takes the pictures and not the camera in front of him or in front of her. And in general, I agree. However, there's also some benefits of having a new camera, and I think people often go on either one or the other side. They're either completely pro a new camera or against a new camera. And in this video, based on my experience, I want to talk a bit about the situations where it can really be worth spending a bit of more money into buying a new camera, and some other situations where I think it's just better to not buy the camera for various reasons. And I will cover 3 pro and 3 contra arguments for each scenario. I think one of the most common negative experiences that people have after buying a new camera is buyer's remorse. Basically, you regret spending a lot of money on a camera that you realize in the end it's not really helping you to get better pictures. And this can easily lead to frustration because you bought this new tool and your photography is still not advancing. And I think this is quite common, and therefore it's really important to think twice if you should buy a new camera or not. A second reason for not buying a new camera is that actually in some situations your images can get a bit worse. This sounds completely weird, but let me explain. If you have used your old camera for, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years, you know it very well. I hope that you can basically use the camera and operate it without needing to look at the buttons. You know where the buttons are, you can keep your eye on the viewfinder the whole time when making the important adjustments. If you now switch to a new camera, usually if you try to keep at a similar level of camera, let's say from a Canon EOS R6 to a R6 Mark II, the differences are usually not too big. Most of the buttons are in a similar place, you can put similar functions, but there are situations where the buttons will act somehow slightly differently. They might have different functions, different positions, and this can really lead to the fact that you're actually missing photography opportunities, at least in the first few days or weeks when you get used to this camera. And even though I was really looking forward to using my R5 Mark II in the field, in the beginning I was a bit frustrated because Canon moved the photo-video switch to the position where before we had the on-off switch. So maybe you can already guess it, the first couple of days when I was using the R5 Mark II, I sometimes switched it to video instead of turning off, or even worse, when I went back to the R5, I switched it off instead of switching to the video. And this was very confusing, and to be honest, sometimes it's still confusing because I quickly need to think about which body I have in my hand. So if you go on a photography trip, don't buy a new camera just before. If you want to use a new camera on a photography trip, I completely get it. But buy the camera a bit in advance and allow yourself enough time to figure out how the camera works and how you can set it up that it actually works for you. The third reason against buying a new camera is that the camera is only one element in what basically makes a nice picture in the end. There is many other elements that I would say are more important. We can stick with gear if you want. Even for gear, camera is usually not the most important thing. In my opinion, in most of the situations, lenses are more important than the camera. For some situations, maybe a tripod is actually more important than the camera that you use because it allows you to better or for a longer period of time wait until a specific bird that sits on a branch actually takes off. I recently had a workshop and one of my clients filled his memory card, his CF Express card, and then he needed to continue to write on the slower SD card, which for flight shots was not ideal. So in this situation, maybe a second fast CF Express card would have been actually better than having a new camera. Of course, there's also the big part of the photographer, which goes back to the initial statement of the video, that the photographer takes the image and not the camera. And I think there is a lot of truth behind this, and it's mainly your skills that determine how the image will look like. This can be technical skills, that you know how to use the camera, you know which settings to put, which techniques to get sharp images that have a correct exposure and so on, that you know how the birds move, that you know how to approach them. All these things are very important. Additionally, there is also the more creative aspect of how you compose your image, how you get a cleaner background, how you can work with different light situations, and there is several ways to improve it. If you want to go the free route, basically not spending money, you can just spend a bit of time watching different YouTube tutorials. There's many great wildlife photographers on YouTube that do videos where they help you basically getting better pictures. I'm also doing these videos, and on top of this I have an ebook that on more than 100 pages basically explains the most important aspects of bird photography and helps you getting better images. You can also book workshops, you can book photography trips, and I think in many situations this might be money better spent than on a new camera body. So let's move to the arguments of why you should buy a new camera. I think for me the first and very important one is usually photography is a hobby, and a hobby by definition should be fun, right? And if you have more fun with a new camera, if you enjoy having a new camera, trying out new things, maybe you just like the bigger body, you like the bigger viewfinder, I don't know what exactly it is. In the end, if it's your hobby, I think this is actually a quite good argument of buying one. Of course, assuming that your financial situation allows it and you don't need to do too many compromises somewhere else. Another thing is that in some situations a new camera can actually give you better images, or give you images that you would have missed otherwise. I remember a few years ago I was taking pictures of some wagtails, and suddenly one was jumping in the air to basically catch a mosquito or catch a fly, and that's an image that I would not have gotten with my old Canon 5D Mark IV, and I got it with the R5 just because of the eye tracking. I'm not saying you cannot get these images with older cameras, it's possible, but often you need to be a bit more prepared, you are less flexible, you can act less spontaneously. And sometimes there is just situations where you don't have like 100 different chances. Maybe you are on this safari, it's a once in a lifetime situation. And of course you want to have this image in this situation. If you take pictures of rather shy subjects that react very sensitive to noise, mainly the shutter sound of your camera if you're shooting a DSLR, or maybe an older mirrorless camera where the electronic shutter is really giving a bit of problem with the distortion with the rolling shutter, then I think upgrading to a new mirrorless camera that has a fast readout and where you can use the electronic shutter without any issues can really make a difference. And when I upgraded to my R5 Mark II, I was really looking forward to the pre-burst or pre-capture, that you can take pictures before you fully press the shutter button. And R5 Mark II and the R1 have this feature, and it already allowed me to capture some images that I would just have missed otherwise. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible to take these pictures otherwise. For some birds, like for mallards, it's quite easy. If you know the birds a bit, it's quite easy to predict when they are taking off. And for example, I managed to take this shot with my old R5 that didn't have pre-capture. So it's definitely possible. But there's other species where it's a bit more subtle indicators that they are taking off. Or maybe you only have one chance because you're on a specific safari where you will not come back. Or even if I'm at my local river and I'm trying to take pictures of a bird taking off in backlit with some mist in the early morning. Well, I live in Zurich. To be fair, the thing that you have in winter, mist and sun in the morning, that's maybe once a week. The rest of the time you have more fog than anything else. So I don't have so many chances there. And if I have a day that works, the really nice backlit with these orange colors, this is maybe, it's a time window of maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And here I think pre-burst or maybe other features like a faster frame rate can really help. The last point that I want to make sounds a bit similar as the first one about the fun that I just did, but it's something else. If you buy a new camera, at least it's for me, I sometimes just feel obliged to go outside because I feel now I have a new camera, I need to use it. I spent a lot of money, so I need to use it. And actually this has helped me in some situations to get shots that otherwise I would not have taken. Maybe you know the same thing if you're on holidays, on vacation, on a photography trip. Maybe the light is not so good, you're a bit tired, but you still go because you know it's something that you cannot do again in a few weeks. You're already there, so you go out. And sometimes this gives the nicest pictures. And the same for a new camera. I recently borrowed the Canon EOS R1 from Canon, and the weather was not really good, but I decided to anyway pack my tent, pack my backpack, go into the mountains and sleep a night up there. And it was foggy basically the whole evening. Sometimes the fog cleared a bit and I could take some images, but I didn't have much hope for some amazing light. But then like 10 minutes before sunset, it really opened up. I had amazing backlit and I think I managed to get probably my favorite chamois shot that I have ever taken. And it's just because I had this camera and I was like, okay, I have this camera now, I need to use it. And sometimes you can have the same effect if you buy a new camera. So I hope this video gave you some different viewpoints on buying a new camera versus sticking with your old equipment. In the end, it's a very personal choice. I also don't think there's a right or wrong. And I would be very curious if you could write me in the comments what your experiences are. If you had like buyer's remorse or something, managed to get some shots that you would not have gotten with an old camera, or if you find another reason for buying or not buying a camera that I didn't mention here. Thanks for watching. I will be happy if you subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video.